Aloha mai kako, you are watching Hawaii Political Reporter.
On the morning of September 11, 2001, 19 men armed with box cutters directed by a man on dialysis in a cave fortress halfway around the world using a satellite phone and a laptop directed the most sophisticated penetration of the most heavily defended airspace in the world, overpowering the passengers and the military combat-trained pilots on 4 commercial aircraft before flying those planes wildly off course for over an hour without being molested by a single fighter interceptor. These 19 hijackers, devout religious fundamentalists who like to drink alcohol, snort cocaine, and live with pink-haired strippers, managed to knock down 3 buildings with 2 planes in New York, while in Washington a pilot who couldn't handle a single-engine Cessna was able to fly a 757 in an 8,000-foot descending 270-degree corkscrew turn to come exactly level with the ground, hitting the Pentagon in the Budget Analyst Office where DoD staffers were working on the mystery of the $2.3 trillion that Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld had announced missing from the Pentagon's coffers in a press conference the day before, on September 10th, 2001. Luckily, the news anchors knew who did it within minutes.
Osama bin Laden.
The pundits knew within hours.
Osama bin Laden.
The administration knew within the day.
Terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbored them.
And the evidence literally fell into the FBI's lap.
That a hijacker's passport was found blocks from the World Trade Center crash site, if you can believe that.
But for some reason, a bunch of crazy conspiracy theorists demanded an investigation into the greatest attack on American soil in history. That investigation was delayed, underfunded, set up to fail, a conflict of interest, and a cover-up from start to finish. It was based on testimony extracted through torture, the records of which were destroyed. It failed to mention the existence of WTC-7, Able Danger, P-TECH, Sibel Edmonds, OBL and the CIA, and the drills of hijacked aircraft being flown into buildings that were being simulated at the precise same time that those events were actually happening. It was lied to by the Pentagon, the CIA, the Bush administration, and as for Bush and Cheney, well, no one knows what they told it because they testified in secret, off the record, not under oath, and behind closed doors. It didn't bother to look at who funded the attacks because that question is ultimately of little practical significance. Still, the 9/11 Commission did brilliantly answering all of the questions the public had, except most of the victims' family members' questions, and pinned blame on all the people responsible, although no one so much as lost their job, determining the attacks were
failure of imagination.
Because
nobody in our government, at least, and I don't think the prior government that could envision flying airplanes into buildings.
Except the Pentagon, FEMA, NORAD, and the NRO. The DIA destroyed 2.5 terabytes of data on Able Danger, but that's okay because it probably wasn't important. The SEC destroyed their records on the investigation into the insider trading before the attacks, but that's okay because destroying the records of the largest investigation in SEC history is just part of routine record keeping. NIST has classified the data that they used for their model of WTC-7's collapse, but that's okay because knowing how they made their model of the collapse would jeopardize public safety. The FBI has argued that all material related to their investigation of 9/11 should be kept secret from the public, but that's okay because the FBI probably has nothing to hide. This man never existed, nor is anything he had to say worthy of your attention, and if you say otherwise, you are a paranoid conspiracy theorist and deserve to be shunned by all of humanity. Likewise him, and her. And her, and her, and him. Osama bin Laden lived in a cave fortress in the hills of Afghanistan, but somehow got away. Then he was hiding out in Tora Bora, but somehow got away. Then he lived in Abbottabad for years, taunting the most comprehensive intelligence dragnet employing the most sophisticated technology in the history of the world for a decade, releasing video after video with complete impunity and getting younger and younger as he did so, before finally being found in a daring SEAL team raid which wasn't recorded on video, in which he didn't resist or use his wife as a human shield, and in which these crack special forces operatives panicked and killed this unarmed man, supposedly the best source of intelligence about those dastardly terrorists on the entire planet. Then they dumped his body in the ocean before telling anyone about it. Then a couple dozen of that team's members died in a helicopter crash in Afghanistan. This is the story of 9/11, brought to you by the media which told you the hard truths about
his head could be seen to move violently forward.
And
they took the babies out of the incubators.
And
mobile production facilities.
And
the rescue of Jessica Lynch.
If you have any questions about this story, you are a batshit paranoid tinfoil dog-abusing baby hater and will be reviled by everyone. If you love your country and or freedom, happiness, rainbows, rock and roll, puppy dogs, apple pie, and your grandma, you will never ever express doubts about any part of this story to anyone. Ever. This has been a public service announcement by the Friends of the FBI, CIA, NSA, DIA, SEC, MSM, White House, NIST, and the 9/11 Commission. Because ignorance is strength.
And I tried hard to be proud of my service, but all I could feel was shame. And racism could no longer mask the reality of the occupation. These were people, these were human beings. I've since been plagued by guilt anytime I see an elderly man, like the one who couldn't walk, who we rolled onto a stretcher and told the Iraqi police to take him away. I feel guilt anytime I see a mother with her children, like the one who cried hysterically and screamed that we are worse than Saddam as we forced her from her home. I feel guilt anytime I see a young girl, like the one I grabbed by the arm and dragged into the street. We were told we were fighting terrorists. The real terrorist was me, and the real terrorism is this occupation. Racism within the military has long been an important tool to justify the destruction and occupation of another country. It has long been used to justify the killing, subjugation, and torture of another people. Racism is a vital weapon employed by this government. It is a more important weapon than a rifle, a tank, a bomber, or a battleship. It is more destructive than an artillery shell, or a bunker buster, or a Tomahawk missile. While all those weapons are created and owned by this government, they are harmless without people willing to use them. Those who send us to war do not have to pull a trigger or lob a mortar round. They do not have to fight the war, they merely have to sell the war. They need a public who is willing to send their soldiers into harm's way. They need soldiers who are willing to kill and be killed without question. They can spend millions on a single bomb, but that bomb only becomes a weapon when the ranks of the military are willing to follow orders to use it. They can send every last soldier anywhere on earth, but there will only be a war if soldiers are willing to fight. And the ruling class, the billionaires who profit from human suffering, care only about expanding their wealth, controlling the world economy. Understand that their power lies only in their ability to convince us that war, oppression, and exploitation is in our interest. They understand that their wealth is dependent on their ability to convince the working class to die to control the market of another country. And convincing us to kill and die is based on their ability to make us think that we are somehow superior. Soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen have nothing to gain from this occupation. The vast majority of people living in the U.S. have nothing to gain from this occupation. In fact, not only do we have nothing to gain, but we suffer more because of it. We lose limbs, endure trauma, and give our lives. Our families have to watch flag-draped coffins lowered into the earth. Millions in this country without health care, jobs, or access to education must watch this government squander over $450 million a day on this occupation. Poor and working people in this country are sent to kill poor and working people in another country to make the rich richer. And without racism, soldiers would realize that they have more in common with the Iraqi people than they do with the billionaires who send us to war. I threw families onto the street in Iraq, only to come home and find families thrown onto the street in this country, in this tragic and unnecessary foreclosure crisis. We need to wake up and realize that our real enemies are not in some distant land. They're not people whose names we don't know and cultures we don't understand. The enemy is people we know very well and people we can identify. The enemy is a system that wages war when it's profitable. The enemy is the CEOs who lay us off from our jobs when it's profitable. It's the insurance companies who deny us health care when it's profitable. It's the banks who take away our homes when it's profitable. Our enemy is not 5,000 miles away. They are right here at home. If we organize and fight with our sisters and brothers, we can stop this war, we can stop this government, and we can create a better world.
Trust me. We're doing the right thing. We know who the bad guys are. And if people can't trust not only the executive branch, but also don't trust Congress and don't trust federal judges, then we're going to have some problems here. the people who are involved in America's national security, they take this work very seriously. They cherish our Constitution.
The last thing they'd be doing is taking programs like this to listen to somebody's phone calls.
To Turkey?
Trust me.
Hawaii Political Reporter is not owned, influenced, or an agent of corporate, government, or special interest. We are a local, honest, independent source of political news and commentary. Our primary goals are to promote awareness of the non-aggression principle and to reduce violence, war, and death. To promote economic liberty, prosperity, and true civil rights, as in the U.S. Constitution. To promote transparency and to bring awareness of corruption in government and the collusion at all levels with big-moneyed individuals and special interests to deprive the people of true choice of government. Government that is truly by and for the people, for prosperity and freedom.
Welcome, this is James Corbett of CorbettReport.com.
And I'm James Evan Pilato of MediaMonarchy.com, and we welcome you back to The New World Next Week, and of course you can find everything you need at NewWorldNextWeek.com. I was remiss last week in putting out to the audience, as we always want to do, for story ideas using hashtag #NewWorldNextWeek for story submissions. Now, having said that, we will lead James with a very interesting, very important, and very pressing story that we will take from Reason.com. Encrypted email providers shutter services to protect users from government snoops. Last week, two companies, first it was Lavabit and then Silent Circle, both shut down their encrypted email services abruptly and with no warning. Lavabit's announcement was both cryptic and frightening, with the owner, Ladar Levison, strongly implying that the move came to avoid submitting to government surveillance demands. Silent Circle CEO Mike Janke then explicitly stated that his firm was closing the company's email servers without warning, so the U.S. government would have no opportunity to seize data. Both moves are sad, but commendable, as they stand as scathing indictments of U.S. law and officials. They also suggest that at least one industry and its related talent and technology are likely to move offshore. Levison's statement read, in part, quote, "I've been forced to make a difficult decision to become complicit in crimes against the American people or walk away from nearly 10 years of hard work by shutting down Lavabit. After significant soul-searching, I've decided to suspend operations. I wish that I could legally share with you the events that led to my decision. I cannot. I feel you deserve to know what's going on. The First Amendment is supposed to guarantee me the freedom to speak out in situations like this. Unfortunately, Congress has passed laws that say otherwise." James?
Well, what do you say to that? I think there's a few things we should observe about this. First of all, not only the courage of people like that who have stood up to the system and instead of selling out their users have walked away from the table altogether. That's a pretty difficult move to make. So hats off to people who do have at least a little bit of backbone and will stand up to this encroaching tyranny. And on that, in that regard, we should, of course, remember the story of Joseph Nacchio of Qwest, the CEO of Qwest, who was indicted for insider trading back in 2007, but was clearly being retaliated against by the NSA for not going along with the snooping that was taking place at that time with the other telecom companies, all of which were granted retroactive immunity for their illegal spying. So I will point people to a Daily Caller article from June of this year that goes over that. It's called "Jailed Qwest CEO Claimed that NSA Retaliated Because He Wouldn't Participate in Spy Program." And it says, quote, "In court papers filed during his 2007 insider trading trial, former Qwest CEO Joseph Nacchio claimed that Denver-based Qwest was denied lucrative NSA contracts he believed to be worth $50 to $100 million after he refused to involve Qwest in a secret NSA program that he thought would be illegal." So there are some people who do stand up to the system and they are retaliated against, and they do see their livelihoods flushed down the toilet because of it. So we do have to stand by people like that who will stand up to the system. But on the other hand, what this also shows is that even if there is technology that can circumvent the types of controls that they want to put in place and the types of snooping efforts that they have up their sleeve, if you actually try to implement them, guess what they're going to do? They're just going to pass a law saying you have to comply with us or go out of business. So it is a rigged game played by crooks, and they're not going to let the people win. And the only possible solution, once again, is for us to start building up the alternative infrastructure that they have nothing to do with. And that's a long, slow, painful, arduous process that's a lot like real work. And that's because nothing is ever handed to you on a silver platter. The internet is only free and open because it is the biggest, wonderful spy grid that the USA intelligence networks have ever created. And it comes with a horrible price. So again, I think we're going to have to start investing in the alternative infrastructure.
James, I may have buried the lead there, because the main thing that people would be really excited about this is when I would tell them this was Edward Snowden's email service. That was the headline. Snowden's email service shuts down rather than submit information to the government. Now, having said that, we'll throw in a couple of related notes. Interesting one, Microsoft reverses itself on its Xbox One camera requirement, pretty much because of all the NSA spying revelations. So we had reported on this previously, and we even did way back about 2.5 years ago, James. We talked about Microsoft's Kinect is your video game machine watching you, and of course it is. What Microsoft has reversed themselves on is the requirement that the camera be connected for the Xbox One to work. So I think this about face kind of shows why Obama and national security enthusiasts have been so upset about all these recent revelations, because corporations rely on the trust of their consumers. And that's all completely blown up in light of all these recent NSA revelations. James, in closing, I think it's important to mention that the aforementioned Barry Soetoro, the president referred to as Obama, has achieved what Tricky Dick Nixon couldn't, as Bradley Manning has been convicted of espionage. So again, we'll provide all the links for you, and as we always intend you guys to go check all this out for yourselves, and don't take our word for any of this. Our second story, James, is a really interesting one, and we'll take it from the tabloid, the Daily Mail, but it's been reported on all around the world. More than 100,000 people want to fly to Mars in 2022 and never come back. More than 100,000 people have applied to be part of the Mars One project, which aims to colonize the red planet starting in 2022. Out of the thousands, 40 people will be selected. Of that 40, just 4 will participate in the first passage to Mars, which is scheduled to leave in September 2022 and land 7 months later in April 2023. None of the 4 will ever return to Earth. More than 30,000 Americans have applied for the chance to be the very first settlers on Mars, paying a $38 application fee. The audacious project is the brainchild of a Dutch company run by CEO and creator Bas Lansdorp. Lansdorp told CNN that the price is based on the gross domestic product per capita of different nations. So, for example, as we said, the U.S. pays $38, Mexico pays $15 application fee. We want it to be high enough for people to really think about it and low enough for anyone to be able to afford it, Lansdorp said. The very first mission to Mars will cost $6 billion. And Lansdorp intends to, here's where it gets funny, fund the mission by creating, of course, a reality TV series about the mission, documenting everything from the astronauts' training on Earth right through to touchdown on Mars and their daily lives once on the planet. Sponsors and media agencies would pay to broadcast the Mars mission. James, I would just have to turn around and ask you, would you consider this even for a second?
Well, I think we've all thought about getting off of this planet, but maybe not in that way. Well, at the very least, at least this is a private enterprise initiative, so I have nothing against it. If people want to sign up for it and want to go through this, and if it can be funded this way, well, good on them. I don't really expect that it will happen. I don't think it's seriously going to happen in this manner, but you never know. It's kind of, I think, ridiculous that they have the foresight to think about interplanetary travel, but not the foresight to see that the television funding medium is a failed paradigm. And I mean, how quickly would it just turn up as a torrent online. I mean, no one's going to pay for this. So I think that's ridiculous. But I mean, it's an interesting little idea. And again, at least it's private enterprise and not NASA or something trying to do this. So I'm behind that part of it.
I guess I find these kind of stories fascinating because these are the sorts of things for me that, always remind us that, wow, we really are living, we are living in the future. And I think, it would probably depend on what kind of personal situation you were in as to whether or not you would actually want to do this and want to go through with it. But James, I don't know. I can maybe see the flip side where once you got that Coca-Cola and Samsung money and all that stuff starting to flow in, they would love to plaster their logos all over this thing, and it would probably more than pay for itself, I would guess.
Well, there's certainly money to be made from it, so we'll see how it if it comes together. But still, I think there must be a lot of legal ramifications to this, and yeah, I mean, for people who are literally signing up to go away and never ever in their entire lives return to Earth, that's a pretty big decision, and one that I don't know how they could live with. But at any rate, it's going to be interesting to find out.
And of course, there's no guarantee. Yeah, you won't be returning to Earth, and there's also no guarantee that you're going to make it to Mars in the first place either. An interesting
Open the pod day doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, James. I'm afraid I can't let you do that. Here's an interesting related one as well, and this is up on my Twitter feed, @MediaMonarchy. After 6 months, the Mars food study researchers have emerged from under the dome in Alaska. Researchers have been living in a dome in Alaska trying to figure out the food situation. So once, we get the tourist thing to land on Mars, how are we going to grow crazy-ass food there? Having said that, James, our third and final story this week was something actually that Brock West and I had kind of chatted about, and I actually have no text I'm going to read for you. He and I just found it really interesting, and again, at my day job at a radio station, of course, there's TV screens all over the place, and CNN is on one of them constantly. And I really noticed, one, in addition to CNN obviously trying to change up, and they look like they're trying to fox up their lineup as they've added lots of sort of younger and attractive people. And one of those younger and attractive people is my man Morgan Spurlock we're born in the same county in southern West Virginia. Of course, he made the film Super Size Me and Mansom and Where in the World is Osama bin Laden, and he made the 30 Days TV series. He has a new series on CNN called Inside Man, where each episode he kind of goes into an area to explore. Some of the recent episodes have been, I think, about drought, and some have been about the military. But the very first episode of Morgan Spurlock's Inside Man on CNN was all about the medical marijuana industry. And he goes in and he works for a major dispensary in California and basically lays it all out, how all this garbage started with putting marijuana as a controlled one or, Schedule 1 controlled substance, again, back in the Nixon era. Spurlock comes away from it going, gosh, it sure kind of seems like this whole industry is all built on, that would be the incarcerating people for marijuana. This whole industry is built for the run-for-profit prisons and the treatment centers, and he basically calls it out as being a huge scheme. Now, Sanjay Gupta, who is kind of the CNN's main go-to doctor guy, he has a whole new special called Weed. And I couldn't help but wonder, and this is, again, what Brock and I were kind of speculating about, James, and I'm going to throw it to you. It seems as though there's some kind of push on CNN, and Sanjay Gupta is a Council on Foreign Relations member, and I've done a little bit of digging into Morgan Spurlock's movie industry connections, and he's big buddies with studio heads who are, of course, Bilderberg and CFR members as well. So, James, the question I'm posing, is the Council on Foreign Relations and mainstream media really pushing the idea and getting people ready for, okay, we're going to let you have medical marijuana?
It could be. I mean, I think we have two options here. Either this is suddenly the light has been switched on and the green light has been given, and now they are pushing this agenda, or perhaps, I mean, maybe they realize that this is where the people are, so they're moving to meet it, and to, as part of that revivification of CNN or whatever. I mean, I don't know which it is, but it certainly does seem to, the timing of it and the coordination, and I mean, it certainly seems to be coming all at one time. So there might be something behind it. What do you think is, I mean, what is the end goal of this then? If, I mean, after decades and decades and decades and decades of vilification of marijuana and the criminalization, which has obviously been so lucrative for the jailers and the people who ship the drugs in with CIA complicity, why would they switch the tune now?
My only guess is that they realized what we've all known and what we've all been shouting from the rooftops for so long, is that the industrial hemp plant can be used to make so many more things, and we can make paper and fuel and food, and all of those kind of industrial needs could be met, and we wouldn't be tearing down forests and destroying our world. I think they want to tax it. Basically, I think they want to get the control of it themselves so they can say, oh, well, you don't want to trust all those other shady, weird people. You want to get it from us. And I would just look at it, yeah, as another kind of industry, round of revenue, because they knew ultimately that I don't think they were going to be able to keep this going forever and tricking and lying to people about the dangers of marijuana, and that at some point they knew they were going to finally have to relent. And I think the stories are, James, that pretty much, all the tobacco companies, they all have, their sort of design pack for, a pack of joints all ready to go. They've got the names and the slogans, and they're just kind of rubbing their hands and waiting for this, rush to happen.
Well, that does make sense. There is certainly a lot of money that can be made from it and squeezed out of taxpayers and the like. So I'm sure that they have certainly thought about that aspect of it. And again, it does make a certain sense because, of course, the real drug money comes from cocaine and other things that are much harder to grow and refine and process and the like. Whereas marijuana is a weed; it grows anywhere. So everybody already has it growing all over the place. So I can see that they're just going to try to restrict it, regulate it, tax it, control it, and make sure that they get their cut from it. So it certainly makes sense, and I have no information whether this is part of a coordinated agenda, but it certainly looks that way.
So we can just throw that out to the audience to tell them to kind of keep their eye on this situation and see if it really if it's the the mainstreaming of it happens. I personally would like to think that a lot of people kind of see the light in these situations when it affects them finally, personally, like when their grandma says, I don't know, when I got some of the cannabis, I finally felt better. And then that's going to kind of change their mind.
Of course, and those stories snowball on each other so that it starts to become more of a mainstream phenomenon, and as more people talk about it, more people try it, etc. So yes, I mean, I do see that occurring, and especially now that we had some states starting with the legalization of medical marijuana, and I think that's a snowball that is going to continue rolling down the hill. So perhaps they're just trying to get in front of it to make sure they tax it as it rolls.
And once all the money starts to roll in Washington and Colorado, all those other states are going to go, hey, I want to get on board with that. So James, just to wrap it up now, and speaking of things growing all over the place, the interviews that I did at the recent Seattle Biodiversity Conference, those are all up, and those are posted on MediaMonarchy.com. And I also even did an interview earlier today with a conspiracy researcher named Adam Gorightly, and we talked about the dead comedian conspiracy. So I'm trying to book some more interviews for Media Monarchy. So again, folks, keep their eye on the feed.
Interesting stuff. I will be keeping my eye on the feed, or more appropriately, my ear. But in the meantime, also, if people have been coveting after my very cool Unlearn Fear t-shirt during today's episode, it's provided by wearethird.net. They sent me a free copy. You might remember this is the exact same shirt that Richard Grove was wearing in his recent appearance on the Corbett Report. Well, not the exact same shirt. I'm not wearing his shirt per se, but it's the same design. So people can go to wearethird.net for more of those types of designs. I think they're really cool. Nice shirts with a nice simple message. And on that note, speaking of t-shirts, I think Chris Andrews, our friend at redhotinkers.com, also has some Corbett Report t-shirts still available for sale. So if people are interested in that, they can head out over there. But I think that's going to bring it to an end for this week. So James, thank you once again for this week. I'm looking forward to next week.
Thanks so much, man. My pleasure. Take care.
But it was given up in the Federal Reserve Act. The Federal Reserve is no more federal than Federal Express.
You try a hide and destroy a freedom. You seek agenda. We know you enter. anti-American. You come forward American Constitution. 1913, corrupt in the system. Devalue dollar, hyperinflation. The Federal Reserve, controlled by Lucifer. He can see you lying.